The choice to refuse aid to these children is political. The forced starvation of children is political. That Palestinian lives matter as much as anyone's lives matter. That Palestinian rights are human rights. And that all children deserve justice. Canada currently holds a double standard when it comes to the question of Israel and Palestine in international law. Last week, a 13-year-old boy was shot to death in East Jerusalem after lighting fireworks. In a moment of joy and play, this child was killed. And the Israeli Minister of National Security, Ben-Gvir, the same minister who was arming extremist settlers with assault rifles, saluted the officer who killed this child. If I must die, you must live to tell my story. Mr. Speaker, those are the words from Rifat al-Rir, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza on December 6th. I rise today in sorrow and in hope. For 5 months, we've watched in horror as horror after horror unfold in Gaza and in Israel. The stories and the images are shocking and heartbreaking. We've seen 2 people utterly traumatized by violence, by death, and by terror. We've seen the complete failure of the international community to stop the unfolding carnage in Gaza. And we are dismayed by the failure of Canada's Liberal government to stand up for what is right, for the rule of international law, for humanity, for peace. Canadians are horrified by a brutal assault on Gaza where over 30,000 civilians have been killed. They were horrified on October 7th by the vile terrorist attack on innocent civilians in Israel by Hamas terrorists, and they are horrified now by the way Netanyahu's extremist government has responded. Canadians believe in peace and justice, not just for Palestinians or for Israelis, but for everyone. Canadians want our government to apply those values universally, regardless of the place, regardless of the situation. And I know this because hundreds of thousands of Canadians have written to me about the war in Gaza. Canadians from every province and territory, of every faith and belief, have asked us to do the right thing and help stop this war. End arms sales to Israel, push for a ceasefire and for the release of all hostages, demand that Israel stop denying humanitarian aid, and seek peace and justice for Palestinians and Israelis. But instead, this government has abdicated its responsibility, ignoring or worse, rejecting international law, tearing apart the global moral fabric that Canada has helped to construct over decades. It doesn't have to be this way. Our NDP motion today sets out specific actions that work towards peace and justice for Palestinians and Israelis. Today, the Liberals and the Conservatives have an opportunity to join the NDP and uphold the values of Canadians, to show that Palestinian lives matter as much as anyone's lives matter, that Palestinian rights are human rights, and that all children deserve justice. We are witnessing the collapse of the rules-based international order in Gaza. Canada has the responsibility and the obligation under international law to prevent genocide where it may occur. Canada has the responsibility to prevent ethnic cleansing, to condemn war crimes, and to uphold international law. But that is not what's happening right now, Mr. Speaker. While Canada rightfully condemns the attacks on Israelis, Liberals are not doing the same thing for Palestinians. In fact, Canada is openly hindering the progress at the International Court of Justice regarding the occupied territories. And Canada's refusal to support the work of the ICJ regarding South Africa's claim and refusal to urge Israel to comply with provisional orders is shocking. I quote Professor Artie Imesis, who's told our Foreign Affairs Committee, quote, Canada's declared commitment to the rules-based international legal order is crucial to maintaining its moral standing in the world. But that commitment must both be and be seen by others as credible, end quote. We are fast losing our credibility. It's very clear to Canadians, to Palestinians, to many Israelis who are fighting for peace, and to the rest of the world that Canada currently holds a double standard when it comes to the question of Israel and Palestine in international law. This month, the UN warned that all arms exports to Israel must stop immediately. And they specifically called out Canada for its military trade with Israel. The NDP has been calling for this for years, even prior to October 7th. And this latest war on Gaza, because of very serious human rights abuses throughout Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. The minister has an obligation under the Arms Trade Treaty to not approve export permits for military goods or technologies where there is a substantial risk of human rights abuses. Mr. Speaker, this is Canadian law. Over the past decade, the NDP is the only party that has called to reform Canada's arms export system, and yet the Liberals do nothing. Last week, a 13-year-old boy was shot to death in East Jerusalem after lighting fireworks. In a moment of joy and play, this child was killed. And the Israeli Minister of National Security, Ben-Gvir, the same minister who is arming extremist settlers with assault rifles, saluted the officer who killed this child.
Wow.
Hundreds of thousands of Canadians have demanded the government of Canada impose an arms embargo on Israel. How can Canada continue to engage in the kind of trade while children continue to be killed and extremist ministers of Netanyahu's government encourage this violence? And of course, Canada must do more to end the illegal arms smuggling to Hamas and other groups that threaten peace and security. We've called out Canada to do this, to stop this. No, not just for Hamas, not just for Haiti, but for the Sahel, for other regions in the world where arms are ending up in the hands of people who are terrorizing civilians. Mr. Speaker, more than 30,000 innocent civilians have been killed in Gaza, including more than 13,000 children. More children have been killed in Gaza in 4 months than in 4 years of conflict worldwide. More than the rest of all wars combined over 4 years. Thousands more are suffering devastating injuries and loss. In Gaza, medical teams have added a new acronym to their vocabulary, WCNSF. Wounded child, no surviving family. 10-year-old Yusuf Aldawi dreams of resting his head in his mother's hands, of going swimming with his brother, of going on walks with his father. But the bomb that fell on his family's home killed them all. This child is not Hamas. The trauma felt by this generation of children will last a lifetime. Save the Children says that the severe mental harm on Palestinian children in Gaza has increased exponentially over the past months. And now 1.1 million children in Gaza are starving to death. Families are foraging for food left by rats. Children scrape flour off the dirt on the street. How can we let this happen? How can we abandon the very principles of law and justice? This is the mass starvation of an entire people. And instead of pushing Israel to let the humanitarian trucks in, trucks blocked at the border by Israel and the extremist settlers, we are participating in aid drops. Aid drops, the most ineffective, inefficient way to deliver aid. Drops that have already killed people on the ground. That can't possibly alleviate the level of starvation that we're seeing in Gaza. These children that are starving are not Hamas. The choice to refuse aid to these children is political. The forced starvation of children is political. And it is against international law. Médecins Sans Frontières told the UN Security Council in February that Israeli forces have attacked our convoys, detained our staff, bulldozed our vehicles, and hospitals have been bombed and raided. At least 165 UNRWA staff have been killed in Gaza since October. That is the largest number of UN staff in history. These are aid workers that have been killed. Allegations that Israeli soldiers tortured Palestinian medical staff from Nasser Hospital. You know, the United Kingdom has asked for an investigation, but where's Canada? As we speak, 1.5 million people are trapped in Rafah, and Israel's defense minister has said that a ground invasion could happen any day. A ground invasion against the most vulnerable people in the world. People starving to death, people with nowhere else to go.